Hey Algebra 2, it's Mr. Szybisty again, and today we're going to talk about factoring trinomials. This is B3. In B2, we talked about factoring by grouping. To do that, you need 4 terms, but here we're only going to be given 3 terms. So we need to know how to handle this situation as well. The first thing you ever do anytime you're dealing with a factoring problem is look to factor out a greatest common factor. And in this case, they all don't have x's, so I know I can't pull out any variables. But in terms of the numbers, I know that 2 will divide into 6, 20, and 6. So I pull a 2 out first, and then I write what's left over. 3x squared plus 10x plus 3. That serves to make our problem simpler so that we can solve it better. This 2 that's on the outside, I'm not going to write it again until I write my answer. It's just going to chill out front, and I'll just remember in the end, I need to write that as my answer. So how do you handle something that has 3 terms like this? We call those trinomials. The tri, just like tricycle, means 3. How do you handle it? The first thing we're going to do is something called blank times blank equals blank plus blank equals. And I need to find some particular numbers. With the top equals, I'm going to write A times C. The bottom one gets B. Remember, with a trinomial, these numbers have names, A, B, and C. So in this case, A times C is 9, and B is 10. So I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to give me 9, and then add to give me 10. Well, 2 numbers that multiply to give you 9 are 9 and 1, and they also add to give you 10. So those are the 2 numbers I want. It's time for the next step. We're going to rewrite the trinomial. And then we're going to break up the middle term. So the middle term is going to change from this 10, and we use these 2 numbers that we found right here to rewrite the middle term. The first does not change. The next is a 9, and it's going to have a variable along with it. Whatever this variable is right here is going to go along with the 9. So plus 9x, and then I use the next one, plus 1, and that also gets the same variable as what's right there. And then finally plus 3. I now have 4 terms. I can handle this. Group, 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 group with a plus in the middle. Out of the first group, I can pull out a 3x, and that leaves me with x plus 3. Out of the second group, I can't pull anything out. There's nothing common. I have to pull something out, so I pull out a 1. And I'm left with x plus 3. Now I do my double check. Is what's inside my parentheses the same? It sure is. That's my first factor, x plus 3. The second factor is what's on the outside, 3x plus 1. And just like I promised before, our GCF, the 2, is going to come down and it's going to be in front of our answer, and that is it. If you were to multiply this out, either using the box or FOIL, what you would notice is that the polynomial that you get is that original polynomial. You can try this out on your own to see that it works. But this right here is our answer. That is our completely factored form. Let's go on to the next example. Once again, I've got a trinomial, which means I want to look for a GCF first. I know I can't pull out a variable because we have an x squared and x, but there is no x over here with the 30, so I know I can't pull out a variable. But 5, 25, and 30, well, they all divide by 5, and it leaves x squared minus 5x plus 6. Now it's time for blank times blank equals blank plus blank equals. Remember, I'm going to put A times C here and B there. The coefficient of x squared is just a 1. So A times C, 1 times 6 is 6. And B in this case is negative 5. Notice how it's got the minus sign in front of it. It's negative 5. So I need 2 numbers. And the same 2 numbers have to multiply to give me 6 and add to give me negative 5. I know they're both going to be negative numbers because 2 negatives multiplied gives you a positive, whereas 2 negatives added would give you a negative. So I know that they'll be both negative. The 2 numbers are negative 3 and negative 2. And I can verify they do in fact multiply to give me 6, and they do add to give me negative 5. So I rewrite the polynomial, x squared minus 5x plus 6, and I'm going to split up the middle term. First stays the same, and now I start using this, negative 3. Remember, I looked right here to find out what the variable is that I'm going to write after this. So it's going to be an x. Now it's time for the second one, minus 2, same variable. And I don't touch the last one, plus 6. Now it's time for group, 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 with a plus in the middle. Out of the first group, I can pull out an x. And what I'm left with is x minus 3. Plus, out of the second group, I notice that the third term is negative, which means I want to pull out something negative. I'm going to pull out, well, the number that goes into 2 and 6 is 2, so I'm going to pull out a negative 2. What's left? X minus 3. I go and do my double check. What's inside is the same. So I know that my first factor is x minus 3. The second factor is what's left on the outside, x minus 2. And just like I did in the last example, our GCF gets written in front to make this completely factored. And there's our answer. So now we're going to move on and give you a U-try. Here's your U-try. 2x squared minus 4x minus 6. Remember, look for a GCF, and then blank times blank equals, blank plus blank equals, and see if you could get the completely factored form. Pause the video. Let's see if you get the right answer. The answer, a GCF of 2, and then the two factors are x minus 3 and x plus 1. Remember, if you didn't get that, make sure that you write some sort of a question. Ask me next class period about this so that we can go over and make sure that you get it. Let's see 2 more examples. We start off looking for a GCF. 15, 1, and 6. Nope, I'm not going to pull out any numbers. X squared, x, but the last term does not have any x's, so I can't pull out x's. And then what about the y's? Now the first term doesn't have any y's. Because nothing is common to every term, we can't pull out a GCF, so I don't worry about it. Now it's time to go ahead and do blank times blank equals blank plus blank equals. And even though this has x's and y's, the process is the exact same. Up here is going to be a times c, and down will be b. 15 times negative 6 is negative 90, and b is 1. So now I have to figure out 2 numbers that multiply to give me negative 90 and add to give me 1. That's going to be kind of difficult because I don't know offhand all the numbers that multiply to give me 90. So here's a strategy. When this number is really big, you can use this strategy to figure it out. Make sure this goes in your notes and especially in your summary. You can write it out over here. And we're going to list all of the numbers that multiply to give us negative 90. Like negative 1 times 90, and negative 2 times 45, or negative 3 times 30. Negative 4 doesn't go into 90, but 5 does. Negative 5 times 18, and negative 6 times 15. And 7 doesn't go in, 8 doesn't go in, 9 does. Negative 9 times 10. There you go. There's the 2 numbers. When you add them together, you get 1. So I know that the 2 numbers are negative 9 and 10. So if you list out all of the factors, it can help you to figure out the 2 numbers that multiply and add. Now we're going to rewrite the original trinomial, 15x squared plus xy minus 6y squared. And I'm going to break up the middle term, which means that I don't touch the first one. Use the first number. And to determine the variable, remember I look at this middle part right here, and the variable is xy. And then I use the second number plus 10, use the same variable xy minus 6y squared. And now I'm all ready for grouping. group, 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 group with a plus in the middle. Out of the first group, I can take out a 3 and an x, and I would be left with 5x minus 3y. Out of the second group, I could take out a 2, and there's a y common. So what I'm left with is 5x minus 3y. And then take a look at the insides here. The insides are the same, which means that that is my first factor, 5x minus 3y. And the second factor is 3x plus 2y, whatever was on the outside. So there is our final answer. Now it's time for a U-try, and we're going to use the same format where you have an x, an xy, and a y squared, but use the same algorithm, the same process in the next example. It's our last one, and it's a U-try, so it's time for you guys to see what you can do. You may need to watch the last example over again, and if you get stuck at a particular point, go to the last example, watch it over again at the same point where you got stuck to see if you could figure out what to do. So let's factor this and see if you get the right answer. Pause the video. The correct answer that you should have gotten was x minus 3y times x plus 2y. Remember to write the questions that you've got, bring them to class, and use that time when you're talking with your classmates to discuss about this answer and try to work it out. Let me know if you have any other questions, and I'll see you guys in class.